Devageet, recently you developed a new process, and you've called it the Starchild Bardo-Karmic Rebirthing process. What does that mean?
The Starchild refers to the guidance that Osho gave me when he talked about the Akashic memories in the teeth. He said specifically that consciousness comes from the stars, but the body comes from the earth. And the whole work of Oshodontics is to try and bring into consciousness the essence of what he was saying. What is it that is in me, in you, in people, that is from the stars, but is embodied in this life now? The Starchild rebirthing process came because as we were doing our past life sessions and focusing more and more on what happens as the person leaves this body, but consciousness is aware of something that is aware of seeing the body as it is in the moment of its dying. That in itself is a momentous discovery. The person who is remembering the past life, in their vision of that life, they can see the body that they have left, and they can see that something has come out of that body in the moment of its dying. And then there's a further discovery that there's something else that is aware of both the body that is dying, the thing that came out of the body, and that witnessing sentient consciousness that is aware of the whole sequence. So as we developed that rebirthing process, as we focused it on the dying moment to see the connection between the death moment and the rebirthing moment. So we followed in the Bardo method, just following as that consciousness leaves the physical body. There's a distinct clarity of when you leave the emotions that were present at the time of the dying, that you, the person, the individual, leaving their emotional body, and then there's another sheath of consciousness which is slipped through as you simply leave that life altogether. That consciousness, just like a snake leaving its old skin, it slips out of the body, the physical body, it slips out of the emotions associated with that body, and it slips out of the thoughts that were the triggers of those emotions. But the consciousness is still there. And as that consciousness moves, it is often seen in that past life sequence as a light merging into the sky, or it appears to be the sky, but it's a merging of what came out of the body into an immensity beyond the body. And then as that develops, the person becomes aware of a growing wisdom, of an understanding of what happened in that life, how the major decisions of that life created that life, the moments of how they decided about who their friends were, who their relationships were, who and what they wanted to associate with in the whole of their life. In other words, their whole life became apparent as they slipped out of the body into this Bardo-Karmic place. I call it a Bardo-Karmic place because as the person, as the consciousness remembers the major decisions of the life they have just left, they become aware that there are certain patterns in those decisions, the way they chose maybe the profession that they used in that life, maybe the way that they actually chose their relationships in that life, maybe the way they chose their spiritual journey in that life, maybe the way they developed a feeling of self in that life. In other words, they come to a place out of the body when they've slipped out of the physical, the emotional, and the mental body. They become aware of a wisdom that is beyond that body. I call it the Bardo-Karmic Wisdom. And in that place, they become aware that there are decisions made that have been made before. In other words, the way of making decisions, the way that you choose to use your power in that life, the way you may have chosen to misuse your intelligence in that life, have been repeated again and again and again. But in that life, as you're living it, you have no memory of it. But in the Bardo-Karmic space, you become aware of those karmic patterns of behaviour which have been following you. This Bardo-Karmic rebirthing process is to make a map of those karmic issues that are repeating in this life and have come from previous lives, and to follow them through the birthing process as it happened in this life. In other words, in the first session, we have a past life, we go into the Bardo-Karmic space and see the karmic patterns that were there in that life, and then we make a map of those karmic repetitions that are repeating in this life. Then, as that person is in the Bardo-Karmic space, there comes a moment when they feel, it's a very strange moment, but they feel pulled, almost like a magnetic attraction, into a new life. And the second session of this process starts with the conception moment, when whatever consciousness was in the Bardo-Karmic space is now seeing and feeling itself in a new body at the very moment when the male sperm meets the egg of the mother. So in other words, the second session then develops from that conception moment to the moment that developing fetus embeds itself in the placenta of the mother. In other words, the second session is the first 3 months in the womb of the new body. And this Bardo-Karmic rebirthing process, because we have a map, the person can see how those karmic patterns are being embodied in this newly forming body. And the star is also referring to the Starlight Transomatic method, where we can dialogue with those behaviour patterns, with those living streams of consciousness that are being embodied, to see if they are necessary in this life. In other words, you bring the consciousness of today, the thin layer of intentional consciousness of today, you bring it into a focus with those unconscious memories that are being embodied in this newly developing life. And then we integrate that. And then the third session is when that newly growing fetus is now becoming embedded. From the 12th week onwards, it's embedded in the mother's placenta. The mother's feelings become the baby's feelings, and it's a whole new area of development. In the first 3 months, the baby is not exactly joined to the mother. It is a free-floating entity, still in contact with its past lives. As it connects to the placenta, then the mother's feelings, the mother's thoughts and ideas and attitudes become part of the feeling, emotional structure of that newly developing child. And the Bardo-Karmic wisdom is slipping away. The sense of past lives becomes less and less available. And here, in this process, we then again bring the Starlight Transomatic method to see and to bring those embedded karmic patterns into a resolution in that trimester, in those 3 months when that newly developing baby is in contact with the mother's womb, but before the birthing. The third session is that 3 months of placental growth. The fourth session is when the baby is getting ready for actual birth into this new life. The baby's body is physically turning, is filling the space within the womb, and then at that point, again, the mother is involved with the baby. She can feel it coming. Her whole attitude and behaviour patterns to do with pregnancy are being received by that child in the moment of its getting ready for birth, and that is in a kind, not exactly a conflict, but it's merging with the old karmic patterns that were there coming from previous lives. And so again, we bring whatever is happening in that fourth session, whatever is happening in that very moment leading right up to birth, we bring that into the map, and we bring our transomatic karmic map to resolve any past karmic issues which are there in the moment of birthing. And then the final session is following through, seeing from the moment of birthing to 3 months later, where the child is bringing its nature, its Bardo-Karmic nature, into the nurture of its new environment. It meets a family, it meets a mother, it meets a father, it meets the culture. And in that interface between nature and nurture is what we call the personality. It's a software of psychological and emotional behavior patterns which are then developing in accordance to those old Bardo-Karmic patterns that had been carried from previous lives. But in seeing the map, we can see what is coming from the past, we can see what is happening now, and we bring our Starlight Transomatic method to work on that. In other words, this is a tremendously profound karmic cleansing, rebirthing process. And at the end of each session, there are 5 sessions, at the end of each session there's an integration, and the integration brings healing, balancing, integrating and harmonizing. It re-establishes the harmonic connection of the consciousness in the developing child with the universal consciousness, which is behind the whole process anyway. This whole work comes from Osho's Akashic transmission, where he told me that the body contains memories. The teeth in particular contain ancient memories, linking right back to the beginning of evolution. And as I developed the work, I realized that the whole body contains memories. The crystalline structures, the structures in the body that are more inorganic, contain the more ancient memories, as if they're more connected to the earth. But the softer tissues, the muscles, the nerves, the fluids, the organs, they contain memories which have been directly affected by lives, and this life particularly, in the psychobiological environment that it found itself. And it's that interface, the interface of nature and nurture, which creates disease or harmony. And so the whole work of Oshodontics is to come back to that point of sentience, that point where consciousness is emerging in its natural way, but is carrying the baggage of the past through Bardo-Karmic memories and entering into this new life unconsciously, again picking up more and more memories, more and more baggage. And this whole work is to bring the thin layer of consciousness, our intentional consciousness of today, to focus in through the Starlight Transomatic method, to clean away the baggage so that the original wholeness of consciousness and intelligence is available to the person. In other words, the individual then re-established their connection to universal Akashic existential consciousness.